Hello and welcome back to Bioclass Bites. In this video, we are going to talk about asexual reproduction. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. These are the unit and lesson titles for this video playlist. First, we will look into the different forms of asexual reproduction. That includes binary fission, budding, sporulation, and vegetative propagation for plants, while we look into parthenogenesis and fragmentation for animals. Then we will look into sexual reproduction. For plants, those will be their life cycles. And for animals, we will look into internal and external fertilization. In this video, we are going to focus on asexual reproduction. If you still remember, when we talked about characteristics of life, we mentioned that one of the most important true criterion of life is the ability to reproduce. So reproduction or procreation is the biological process in which new individual organisms, which we call offspring, are produced from their parents. Okay? So it is a fundamental feature of all known living things, and each individual organism that exists today is a result of reproduction. There are two major forms of reproduction: asexual and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is a type of reproduction wherein one individual gives rise to two or more offspring that are similar genetically to the parent. Okay? We see here difflugia, a unicellular amoeba, dividing to form two amoebas after this division, after this binary fission. Sexual reproduction, on the other hand, usually has two parents who contribute their gamete. So the father will be the one to contribute the sperm cell, then the mother will be the one to contribute the egg cell. So gametes, so those are your sex cells, fuse to produce the offspring. And because of that, because of having two sources of their gametes, this results into sexual combination of the traits of both parents. Okay, genetic combination of both parents. So these are the two major types of reproduction. Before we continue, I recommend that you watch this video from Amoeba Sisters entitled Asexual and Sexual Reproduction. Very informative, everything that you need to know. You will be able to find it in this video, and I'll provide the link in the description below. So what is asexual reproduction? So as mentioned, here only one parent is involved. That parent produces offspring without fertilization or without the union of egg cell and sperm cell, since only one parent is contributing the genetic material. So because of that, because of only one parent contributing the genetic material, all the offspring will inherit their DNA from that parent, making them genetically identical with each other, with their siblings, and to their parent. Okay, so you can actually imagine it as literal cloning of themselves. So we see here asexual reproduction in liverworts, wherein a caducous phyloid is germinating from the actual plant body. Okay, so this is the actual parent body, then growing on its body or its phyloid. Okay, caducous phyloid, which will eventually become new organisms in the future. Okay, so we see here a close-up of a plant, Bryophyllum digremontianum. Okay, and we see here the budding of its offspring. Okay, once they have matured, they will be detached from the actual parent's body, and then when they land and germinate on the soil, they become a new organism, a new individual. I want to emphasize this concept that asexual reproduction gives rise to offspring that are genetically identical to their parents. Okay, they inherit the offspring will inherit their genes from only a single parent. This does not involve the fusion of gametes. This does not involve fertilization, okay, the union of the egg cell and sperm cell, because only one parent is donating or contributing the genetic material. Because of that, this does not change, almost never change the chromosome numbers of the offspring. So asexual reproduction is the primary form of reproduction for the following types of organisms. Single-celled organisms such as archaea and eubacteria. Okay, so generally prokaryotes reproduce asexually and some protists. While many plants and fungi are also capable of reproducing asexually, making them very adapted to survive on land. Now, what is asexual reproduction? So this is a video from Fuse School. So I recommend that you check this out, and I'll provide the link in the description below. Now, these are the major types of asexual reproduction. So we will look into binary fission, budding, sporulation, and vegetative propagation. Let's look into binary fission. In binary fission, the parent organism is replaced by two daughter organisms through dividing literally into two. Okay, that's the meaning of the word. So fission, so that means division or separation. Binary by two. Okay, so literally dividing into two. So we see here the unicellular parent organism. Then it will undergo binary fission by dividing itself into two smaller daughter cells or two smaller offspring, which will eventually grow and become another organism, just like its parent. Okay? So again, binary fission means it literally divides into two. By, two, fission, division, or separation. Only prokaryotes, such as archaea and bacteria, reproduce asexually through binary fission. So do not forget, only prokaryotes, those organisms who do not possess a true nucleus, are capable of binary fission. Eukaryotes, such as protists and some unicellular fungi, reproduce by mitosis. Okay, and this will be the topic for the second quarter. And most of these organisms are also capable of sexual reproduction. Now, to see an animation of binary fission, I recommend that you watch this video. I'll provide the link in the description below. Next will be budding. Okay, it is a form of asexual reproduction in which the new organism actually develops as an outgrowth or a bud from the parent's body. Okay, so they grow from the parent's body, similar to the liverworts which we saw a while ago. Okay, they grow on the parent's body due to cell division at one particular site. Then that new organism remains attached to the parent's body as it grows, only separating from it once it reaches maturity. Okay? So since the reproduction is asexual in budding, the newly created organism is technically a clone. Again, I've mentioned this before because they are genetically identical to their parents. So we see here samples of budding. So we see here from the coral aulopora. Okay? So showing initial budding. So this is the actual coral body. Then growing from it are its smaller buds. Once the buds have matured, they will detach from the parent's body, and then they will become their own organism. So we see here hydra, okay? Hydra, and then this is the main parent's body. Then growing from it are its two buds. Then we see here Cnidarian, okay? Cnidarian, which reproduces sexually through budding. The new individual is growing on the lower right, as you can see here. So once it fully matures, it detaches itself and then become a whole new Cnidarian organism. Then we have here Saccharomyces cerevisiae, okay, and then very obvious the buds are growing from the parent's body. Next type of asexual reproduction is sporulation. So this is the production and the release of spores, as the name implies, sporulation. Organisms such as fungi create spores that grow directly into new individuals. Okay? Reproductive spores. So we have two types of spores. So reproductive spores were found to be formed in eukaryotic organisms, okay, such as plants, algae, and fungi. Okay, when we actually go to plant life cycles, spores will be mentioned there during their normal reproductive life cycle. So reproductive spores are are created and are utilized during the reproductive life cycle of organisms. However, we also have dormant spores. Okay, they are formed for example, by certain fungi and algae. Once they experience unfavorable growing conditions. So the spores of fungi and algae could remain dormant if the environment is not suited for them to reproduce and for them to grow. Then these are images, okay, of sporulation. So this one is a puffball. A puffball is actually a type of fungi. It's related to mushrooms, okay. So once they have to reproduce, no, they will literally puff out their spores. So what you see here is actually not a cloud, no, but it's actually made up of millions and millions of microscopic spores being released into the air. So the wind will carry them. When they land on the soil or when they land on a substrate, then they will grow into another puffball like this. So we see here a frozen intact zoospore. Okay, zoospore of the chytrid fungus Batrachochytrium dendrobatidis. Okay, we see it here. So these are more images of sporulation. So these are the spores of the moss Bartramia epiphylla, okay, when seen under the microscope. Okay, spores and elaters from a horsetail equisetum, okay, and fossil plant spores from Scyllaspora, okay, the Silurian deposits found in Sweden. Then we have vegetative propagation. So this one is exclusively performed by plants. So it is a process by which new organisms arise without the production of seeds or spores. So vegetative, so it's coming from the plant's body, then propagation, okay, creation of new propagation to create, to multiply, okay? Although most plants normally reproduce sexually, okay, we will talk about it in the next video, many have the ability for vegetative propagation. And actually, humans have exploited that ability of plants, okay? We have actually propagated plants, we have propagated plants with desirable characteristics. We have harvested their fruits. We have utilized their body parts that we can consume, and humans have you what do you call this? Humans have exploited, okay, this ability of plants to reproduce through vegetative propagation. Okay. Um, so because of this is only possible now because of plants having meristematic cells. So these are actively dividing cells that are still undifferentiated. Okay, so meristematic cells give rise to cells within the plant's body, and those cells can become different parts of that plant's body, capable of cellular differentiation in the plant's body. So we see here examples of vegetative propagation. Okay, so we see here a new stem, a new stem, okay, a new leaf growing from a stem of a cutting that's less than a week old. So I think you're familiar with this, especially if you have mothers or titas or lolas who are fond of planting plants, okay, ornamental plants or um, uh, plants like malunggay or something. So they will just get cuttings, okay? They will just ask for a cutting of that plant that they wish to propagate. Then they will just let the roots form. Then they will now transfer it to the soil. So that's vegetative propagation. There's no seed involved. There's no spores involved. You actually get a cutting of that plant and then allow it to form its own roots, then transfer to another soil. Okay. Um, so we see here a bulb of muscari. Okay, it has reproduced vegetatively underground to make two bulbs. So this is the first bulb and then another bulb. So these are the results of vegetative propagation. Now, to read more about vegetative propagation, I recommend you check out Science Learning Hub. They have this whole interactive website, and multimedia article about vegetative propagation. I'll provide the link in the description below. Now, this is actually a video on how plants reproduce through vegetative propagation from Britannica.com, entitled Plant Reproduction, Asexual Reproduction. I recommend you to check this out, and I'll provide the link in the description below. How about animals? How do animals reproduce asexually? So these are the three main types of asexual reproduction in animals. The first one is parthenogenesis. So here, there's only one parent involved. That's usually a female, and there's no need for for a sperm cell to fertilize the egg cell. The egg cell will act as a zygote, okay, and eventually mature and grow into an organism. So again, no, so parthenogenesis, there's no sperm cell involvement. A female's egg develops into a new organism without having to be fertilized. Okay. So some amphibians show this ability. My favorite reptile, Komodo dragon, is capable of parthenogenesis. So you can actually search online on animals that are capable of this. So there's no father, all mothers. Only mothers are capable of parthenogenesis. Then other animals also are capable of budding. We've seen Hydra a while ago. So Hydra is an animal. So budding a bud can be formed from the parent's body, which will eventually mature and then detach itself and grow into another individual. Then we also have fragmentation. So the example here is a sea star or a starfish, wherein the parent breaks into multiple pieces, fragments, and each of the body part, okay, each of the body parts, so it's broken down into several pieces. Each of the body part can become a fully functioning independent individual. Now, do not confuse fragmentation with regeneration. So regeneration is usually when, lizards lose their tail, then they can regrow a tail. Okay? But the tail that was detached, okay, cannot become a whole new lizard anymore. But in fragmentation, that's possible. So, for example, in some sea stars that undergo fragmentation, every piece that was broken from the parent's body can become eventually can become another organism. So if it was broken into three pieces, three offspring will come from that. So that's fragmentation. All the broken pieces can become another individual. So so we see here some variations of reproduction in animals. So we have what we call hermaphrodites in animals. So those organisms possess both male and female gonads, or both male and female reproductive systems. So we have here an example of hermaphrodite sea slugs, okay, called nudibranchs, or Nembrotha chamberlaini. Again, no, whenever you see Latin names like this, these are the scientific names of the organisms, and this is how they're supposed to be written. Okay, you've seen several examples already. So they must be italicized when encoded or typewritten, okay, or encoded in a computer. Italicized with the first letter of the first word in capital letter. So this is the genus name. Then the second name, small letter, okay, followed by the small letter. So here we see here a mating, okay, a reproduction of sea slugs, okay. So both of them are hermaphrodites. Both of them have egg cell and sperm cell. So when they reproduce, they exchange sperm cells, okay. They provide sperm cells with each other to fertilize the egg cells of the other. So after their mating, after their reproduction, both of them will have fertilized egg cells, and then they can now have their offspring. Um, so we have here hermaphrodism and protogeny. Okay, so the blue head wrasse with the scientific name Thalassoma bifasciatum. Okay, so the females are sometimes of this species can turn into males. Okay, So here we see a large male, okay, which had been a female before changing its sex. Okay, so this used to be a female, but possibly because of the absence of male in the population, it turned into a male, and then it is now capable of fertilizing the egg cells of the other female fish. Okay. So we see here the bigger male and then the rest are smaller females. So we have this variation of reproduction in animals. Now we've mentioned parthenogenesis a while ago, okay? So another, aside from Komodo dragon, okay, the desert grassland whiptail lizard with the scientific name Aspidocelis uniparens. This is an all-female species because they reproduce solely through parthenogenesis. They do not need a male to donate or to contribute the egg, the sperm cell. All of them can reproduce using an um, unfertilized egg, okay? So the ovulation of that unfertilized egg is stimulated by mating behavior, okay? So we see here both lizards are females, okay? Both of them, because this is an all-female species. The one on top is playing the role of the male, um, just to stimulate the ovulation. So they are recreating the sexual reproduction between a male and a female, but both of them are females. They are just doing this to stimulate the ovulation. Then the individuals switch roles 2 or 3 times through their breeding season. So possibly the next mating event, this organism is the one who will act as the male, just so the other lizards' egg cells will be stimulated. Okay. Um, Now here, you can actually read this article from National Geographic. This lady lizard can reproduce without a mate. Okay. And it's mostly about the Komodo dragon, my favorite reptile. So I provided the link to this article in the description below. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of asexual reproduction? Okay, so let's look at the advantages first. Asexual reproduction enables organisms to reproduce without a mate. Okay, so a female can reproduce without needing a male. Okay, as we've seen in parthenogenesis. Fragmentation, the parent's body can be broken into pieces, and then all the pieces will become a new individual. In budding, the parent's body can actually grow the offspring within its body, which will just be detached once they reach their maturity. So because of that, it's quite efficient because there's no wasted time and energy looking for a mate. And because of not having to look for a mate, this enables some organisms to rapidly reproduce to a large number in a short period of time. And we've seen that in binary fission in bacteria, okay, in bacterial cells. So that's why they reproduce quite fast, because they reproduce through binary fission. All they have to do is to elongate, then divide in half. Now there are two bacterial cells. So that's how easy it is for them to reproduce. So these are all the advantages of asexual reproduction. Now it also has its downside, okay? First, because their offspring are all identical, okay, all the offspring are identical with each other and with their parent, there's no genetic variation. Okay, so this is one of the strengths of sexual reproduction. Since there are two parents contributing in sexual reproduction, there's genetic variation within the offspring, and that genetic variation gives them a better chance for survival. Okay, so the example here, if a weed killer can kill the parent, it will also kill the offspring. So for example, no, a weed, okay, is growing. A weed killer can kill the parent. Okay. Okay. The parent weed can be killed. It can also kill its offspring. The whole species can be wiped out from a single disease. Okay. So for example, all the plants, for example, are propagated vegetatively. Okay. So vegetative propagation. So there's no contribution of another genetic material from a different source. So because of that, any disease can actually kill the entire plant or the entire population of plants, for example, in your farm, because they all came from a single source. They all have the same genetic material. So imagine this idea in humans. If all of us are clones of each other, all of us that has the same genetic material, all of us are, for example, susceptible to a disease called, for example, tuberculosis. If all of us are clones of each other and all of us have weak immune system, a single outbreak of tuberculosis can kill all of us because we are all sharing the same genetic material. There's no variation that would allow us to fight off that disease. Okay? So that's one downside of asexual reproduction. Now, dangerous mutations in the DNA, okay? Some changes in the DNA, alterations of the DNA can be inherited. So if the parent has the mutation, okay, same thing here. If the parent has that dangerous mutation or dangerous disease in their DNA, based on their DNA, then it means that all the offspring will also have that. So there's no ability, there's no chance to fight off or to actually remove the dangerous mutation from their offspring. So those are the disadvantages of asexual reproduction. That ends our video. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. Till next time, goodbye.